using Pulumi and Jenkins to manage your infrastructure as code. As an application developer that also has to manage your own infrastructure, you may be used to doing ClickOps. You know what I mean by ClickOps, right? You log into a console, you point and click and save and pray that your infrastructure works as expected. You may also be aware of declarative ways to define your infrastructure as code, such as using Terraform or CloudFormation. However, you just don't have the time to learn these new declarative ways to define your infrastructure. The other thing is you're also really tired of following the ClickOps methodology of pointing and clicking and hoping that your infrastructure works as you expect. When you're using ClickOps, that can be very error-prone and can be very complex to audit. This is where Pulumi can help out. Pulumi gives you the ability to define your infrastructure as code using languages such as TypeScript, Python, and many others. In this video, we're going to look at how you can integrate Pulumi with Jenkins to more easily manage your infrastructure as code. Here's today's starting point. I have a Jenkins LTS controller. It's version 2.303.2. Attached to this controller, I have an agent, and on that agent, I have the Pulumi binary, and I also have Node.js 17. We're also using a sample repository in this video. The link to that repository is down in the description. I've already cloned the repository locally, so let's take a look at what's in there to begin with. So what we have are just a handful of Jenkins files. We're just going to start with Jenkins file 1. We'll take a look at the others as we move through the video. So what we're going to do first is we're going to verify the tooling that exists on our agent. And we're going to check the version of Node, NPM, Pulumi, and we're also going to print out our environment variables. So let's go and create a job. Here we go. Inside our controller. So we're going to say new item, and we're going to call this Jenkins-example-Pulumi, and it's going to be pipeline. I'm going to click OK, and I need to go pull it up. So let's go take a look at that repository. So that's Jenkins-example-Pulumi. And what we have here is this. Go back over here, scroll down. Click on that, there and here. The branch that we're using is main, and the Jenkins file we're going to use first is Jenkins file -1. Let's click on save and click on build now. If we take a look at the output, what we should see is we have Node 17, we have NPM 8.1, we have Pulumi 3.16, and then the output of our environment variables that we'll be using a little bit later on. So now that we have verified that the tooling that we're going to need, Node.js and the Pulumi binary, exist on our agent, now let's go and create the code that we need in order to provision the infrastructure that we're going to want to create. So if we take a look at the Pulumi documentation, I have chosen today to use TypeScript. You could have used JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, a few flavors of .NET, and also Golang. Again, I'm using TypeScript because my example is really short, and this was the simplest thing for me to use to be able to explain it to you. You can choose to do whatever you want as long as it's within that language set. So following this example, we can see here that we need to make dir my project, and we're just creating a project. And then we're going to say Pulumi new TypeScript, and that's going to create all the artifacts that we need in order to get a project bootstrapped. So what I'm going to do is locally, so I'm doing all of this locally at this point. In my shell, I'm going to create my project just inside of a directory. Now it says GitHub here, but this is just a plain directory at this point. And then what I'm going to run is Pulumi new TypeScript. Whoops. Come on. All right. And then what we have here is we're going to see that, oh, we actually need to log in before we can create this. Let me size this up here just a little bit. It's telling us that before you can even create the new, you first have to log in. Well, let's say that I don't want to log in. What are my options? Well, here, let's do a Control-C. And let's go back over to our browser, and let's go ahead and log in to Pulumi. I'm going to click on Get Started. Actually, I'm going to open a new tab. There we go. And click on Sign In, which I guess was above. I could have scrolled up, but that's okay. I've already set up my account, so I'm going to use GitHub. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in as well. And we can see right now the dashboard is empty. I have no projects, no stacks, and then I have my settings. Well, instead of going through the login process, what I can do is create an access token. And this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to create a token. I'm going to name the token Jenkins. We'll click on Create Token. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to first off save it off to the side so I don't forget it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go into our controller and create a credential, specifically a secret text credential for this token. So we'll say secret text. There's the value, and the value I'm going to use is Pulumi access token. Whoops. And that will also be the description. So that's set up. Okay. Now let's go back over to Visual Studio Code, which was right here. The other thing that I need to do is I need to export an environment variable so that the Pulumi binary knows what the access token is. So I'm just going to say export Pulumi underscore access underscore token equals the token that I just created. Okay, so I've done that. Now that I've done that, let's go ahead and run the Pulumi new type script one more time. So now it's logging in using the access token from Pulumi access token. That's the reason why I named it the way I did. Now for the project, I'm going to name it Jenkins example, Pulumi. There we go. The project description is going to be my Linode project. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a object bucket inside of Linode. That's the purpose of this project. You could make up whatever you want. This is what mine is. The stack name. Think of stack roughly as an environment. So in my case, if I had dev, stage, and prod, I would have stacks for dev, stage, and prod. In my case, I'm going to name mine main, and you'll see why in a few moments. So we're creating the stack main, we're installing the dependencies, so it's doing whatever JavaScript stuff that has to be done under the hood to get the project ready. Now, the project is all ready to go, and if I want to do an initial deployment, I could run Pulumi up. Now, I'm not going to do that just yet. As we went through this process to do the Pulumi new, remember I was doing this inside of my project, but that's not actually inside of the Git repository that I want. So what I want to do is go ahead and move over all of the files that I just created inside of my project and put it into Jenkins example Pulumi. So I have one line there which brings over the files. We'll take a look at those in just a moment. And then there's also one hidden file, the getignore file, that is now there as well. So if we were to come back over here and go to Jenkins example Pulumi, now I'm back where I want to be. Let's go ahead and slide that down. We have a Pulumi YAML that has the name, the runtime, Node.js, and the description. So we entered in name and description, but when we said Pulumi new TypeScript, that created the runtime for us for Node.js. Since it is a Node.js project, we have a package JSON, and we also have a package lock JSON, just goes along with the territory. We have a tsconfig JSON, which covers all of the specific TypeScript configurations. Then finally, other than the getignore, we have an index.ts. All of the work that we're going to be doing is going to be inside of the index.ts. At this point, our index.ts is effectively empty. It's just importing Pulumi, but there's nothing going on. So what we want to do now is go ahead and commit these changes and set up our job to actually run our Pulumi up. So let's go back over here and commit all of these changes. So we have tsconfig JSON, Pulumi YAML, package.json, package.lock.json, index.ts, and .getignore. And we'll say initial commit, which if you look at this repository, it's nowhere near the initial commit, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and sync our changes. So now everything is pushed up, and in fact, we can verify that. If we go back over to our repository and we were to refresh here, now we can see our getignore and all the other files that we just committed and pushed. So one more time before we run the job, let's go back over to our console, look at the Projects tab, and we can see that the Jenkins example Pulumi has already been created because when we said Pulumi new TypeScript, this project was created because we had to set up the access token. Rewind back just for a few moments. Think about all the things that we just did to get to this point. And if we take a look at main, what we have is, oh, there's no updates. I'm needing to run a Pulumi up. But notice these commands. I have a Pulumi stack select. We'll see this in just a moment. And we have Pulumi up. Let's go back over to our VS Code and take a look at our Jenkins file 2. Now, if we take a look at the top, and let me get rid of the terminal for now. If we take a look at the top of the Jenkins file 2, we have a shared library. The link to the shared library is also down in the description. My controller already has the shared library defined. We'll look and see where that's being used in just a moment. We're setting up an environment variable. This is our Pulumi access token that we set up on our command line, and we're pulling it in from credentials. Remember that we just created the Pulumi access token secret text credential. So that's going to be loaded into here. We still have our verify tools. We just left those in place. We did take the environment block off of there. And now in our up stage, I'm setting a local environment variable to this stage called Pulumi stack, and I'm calling get Pulumi stack. Get Pulumi stack is a step inside of our shared library. Now, what does it do? So let's go take a look at that step. And what we have here is get Pulumi stack. And what we're doing is we're taking two environment variables, the get URL and the get branch. And if you were to take a look at the output for get URL, it would be https:// and then the full URL. And the branch is origin / in our case, main. Then we want to get just the repository name because when we split it out from URL, it has a .get on it. So we're trying to split it before the .get. So therefore, what we're building is a stack name that matches and is derived from our get repository. Again, our get repository is Jenkins example Pulumi, part of the Darren Pope organization, and we're working with the main branch. So if we were to take a look at this example here, this maps directly back to the main branch on the Jenkins example Pulumi repository inside of the Darren Pope organization. This is an opinionation that I created. That way I don't have to keep up with names. I just define, based on branch name, what I want my stack to be. That's why I picked main as my branch when I set up Pulumi new. So let's go back into our controller. Let's make a change to the job and change configure to Jenkins file 2. And let's watch what happens. We'll click on save and build now. As it starts up, what we should see here is the clone of the shared library. That comes in, no big deal. We see the output from our verifying of tools. We need to run an npm install because the agent is unaware of all the packages that are necessary in order to run. So we first have to run an npm install. We did that, found no problems. Then we set our Pulumi stack, select it to Darren Pope, Jenkins example Pulumi, main. This value here is the string that is created when we call get Pulumi stack, which is back over here, this return value. So let's go back to our controller. Then we run Pulumi up and we give it a -- yes. That's effectively saying, just go ahead, don't make it interactive, just go. So we're saying Pulumi up -- yes. So what happens, and it gives us links that we can go live and take a look at them. It's creating the stack, which the stack had already existed because we did Pulumi new, and we created one new resource. Okay, well, what does that mean? Let's go back over here and let's refresh this page. And when we refresh it, what we're going to see is that we see the initial commit. It gives us the commit hash, and if we were to take a look at the details, well, there's really nothing here. There's a timeline, there's a configuration, which doesn't exist, and an environment, which says Hudson, CLI, and then all the other information about our commit. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and set up our code to create a bucket within Linode. So what we can see here from our documentation from Pulumi registry is that there is a Linode package that's available to us, and there is an example for creating an object storage bucket. And we're going to be using the TypeScript example, and we're going to just be copying this over. Now, I already have a cleaned up version of this that I'm going to bring in because I had to set a couple of specific items. And I'll call those out here real quick. So let's go back over to our index.ts, and I'm going to replace that because it comes in again. So what we're doing is we're getting a handle to an object storage item in US East 1, which is a region within Linode. And then once I have primary, which is the value of where that's going to exist, then I create a new object storage bucket with the name of this, and then I'm passing into it a cluster of primary, which gives me the primary ID off primary, so I'm passing that into cluster, and then the label is going to be the same value as my name. I just chose to make it the same. Both cluster and label are required parameters. If we were to take a look at the documentation, what we're going to see when we take a look at inputs, you're going to see cluster and label are required fields. There are other fields that you could set if you wanted to, but for simplicity's sake, I'm just picking cluster and label. So let's go back over to VS Code. You'll also notice here that it's complaining cannot find the module for Pulumi Linode. Okay, well that's actually fairly simple. We need to set up our import for this just to make sure that it's going to be clean when we push it up. So the command that I need to run for that is npm install Pulumi Linode. So now that I have a terminal here, let's go ahead and paste that in. So I have npm install Pulumi Linode. Hit enter. It does whatever it's going to do. And when we take a look here, Pulumi Linode is all cleaned up. In fact, our whole index.ts looks clean. Let's take a quick look here at our Git changes. Let me go ahead and save this because that hasn't been saved yet. So we have 3 changes going in. I have index.ts, which now has all of our code, specifically for creating the bucket inside of Linode. And then also we have the changes adding in the Pulumi Linode import for both package.json and package lock.json. So all of that is now in place and ready to go. So let's go ahead and say added Linode. Okay, and we need to do that. We'll do that, and we're going to sync those changes up. Now that we've done that, let's go back over to our controller, and we're going to run this one more time. So we're going to say build now, and what we're going to see here as it runs is we're saying, okay, yep, we want to go back to that same stack, yes, and we're trying to run this, but it fails. And why is that? Well, if you think about it, we never created any kind of credential or access token to be able to interact with Linode. So now what we need to do is go and create a token in Linode and define that over in our controller. So how do we know how to handle the token from Linode? Well, let's go back over to the object storage documentation and let's click on Overview. And it talks about, oh, we can provision any of the resources available in Linode. That's great. Here are the libraries that are available. Take a look at installation and configuration. We're looking for things, configuring credentials. What we need is an environment variable named Linode_token. Now we have two choices. We could either set the environment variable, which is what we're going to do inside of our Jenkins file, or you could say Pulumi config set Linode token, and that would push it up to Pulumi, and they would then have the credential there. So since we know that we need Linode token, let's go back over to our VS Code and take a look at Jenkins file 3. So we're adding in a new Linode token value. We're going to create a credential called Linode token, which is also going to be a secret text. And then that should be the only thing that we have to do. So let's go over to Linode, and I've got one here. Let's go ahead and log in, and let's log in here. So the way to create a token on Linode, let me zoom in here. I'm going to go up to my name, API tokens. I'm going to create a personal access token. I'm going to call this Jenkins. And since this credential only needs access to create buckets, I'm going to create a very specific bucket. In fact, I'm going to set it to expire in 1 month. And then the object storage has access to read and write. That's the only token I'm going to create. So if I click on Create Token, I'm going to copy this personal access token. Okay, got that. Let's go back over to our controller. Let's create our new credential. I'm going to name it secret text. The secret's going to go in there first. Make sure I don't forget that. Okay, and the ID is going to be Linode-token. Because it's the ID is going to be read into, let's go back up here. That's the identifier. So that's what we want to name it. And that's going to be loaded into the environment variable Linode_token. So we have that. Let's click on OK. And then finally, what we want to do is we want to make a change to our job. And instead of calling Jenkins file 2, we want to call Jenkins file 3. Click Save. And now, build now. So as this one runs, what we're going to see is our Pulumi up. We're doing Linode, so we have a plus here, so we can see 1 to create. And then we can see that the object storage bucket is being created. 1 was created. We can see that it was creating and then created, and success. So first off, let's go to Linode and let's see if that was really created. We'll click on Object Storage. And sure enough, the bucket's created. Exactly what I wanted. But now if we go back into Pulumi, what we're going to see, if I click on Main, we can see that the update succeeded in a few seconds. In fact, it even maps back to the Jenkins build number, so I could track back to that. Here are all the different tags that are here. If we take a look now at resources, we can see here that we have a Linode provider, and then we are managing the object storage bucket with the name of Darren Dash and some string. So why should you use Jenkins to manage running your Pulumi scripts? First off, it's going to allow you to do code reviews for any of the pull requests that come in for your infrastructure changes. Secondly, since you are using a real programming language, in my case I was using TypeScript, you're able to use linters and static analysis tools to make sure everything is conforming to whatever rules that you want. Finally, since you are using real programming languages like TypeScript, Python, or any of the other ones that are supported by Pulumi, that gives you the ability to run unit tests, integration tests, or any kind of tests that you want. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach out to us on Twitter at CloudBeesDevs. If this video was helpful to you, give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to CloudBees TV yet, why not? Take a moment, click on that subscribe button, and then ring that bell, and you'll be notified anytime there's new content available on CloudBees TV. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next video.